Well, he helped bring Westworld out of the parks and into the futuristic real world. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby, and I'm very excited to sit here with Jay Worth, the visual effects supervisor for Westworld. It's a pleasure to have you on. You know, the biggest change this season 3, you've been with the show since the beginning, but the biggest change probably story-wise and visually is the move to the real world and this new futuristic setting. So I'm kind of wondering, in your mind, what was the most important thing aesthetically for you to accomplish with that big shift?
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, one of the fun things about working with Jonah and Lisa is the fact that they always are pushing this out forward and seeing how far we can go with it. We had been talking about going out into the real world since we started. I remember even back in season 1, Jonah's like, just be ready, because season 3, they're going out into the real world. So the fun thing about it was anything we built inside Westworld, we always tried to make sure that there was going to be a way that we could build it in the real world. So we always tried to make sure that there wasn't a situation of going, okay, well, we're going to do this cool new thing in the park, but there's no way to replicate that in what would, be considered the real world. We always had a mind that we were going to be going out into this place. But the thing with working with Lisa and Jonah is that, they never are content to tell the same story over and over again, if that makes sense. So the world that we knew we needed to build needed to feel real and tactile, just as real as the park had felt. And the interesting thing about the whole show is when you think about it, every inch of this world is designed. When we were in the park, there was nothing that wasn't designed. Everything from, and the interesting thing about it was it meant that you couldn't really just point your camera someplace and shoot. Even out in, beautiful, huge vistas, we still had to remove roads and telephone poles and contrails and planes and things like that, it's those small little details that make it really feel real and make it feel like it's this designed place that people would go to that felt in some ways otherworldly, but also very true to the situation of what this park we were trying to create. And so therefore we had the same challenge when they came into, the real world, as it were. What did that look like? How many conversations did we have about how wide streets should be and what should crosswalks look like? And should there be crosswalks? And what about street signs? What about street lights? How about parking meters? Like all these little nuanced details that we tackle throughout the season. So I was always adamant. I'm like, guys, there's not, I mean, Jonah was the same. It's like, there's not street lights, there's not signals for cars because everything's automated. And so even when, people did, dust off the old cars, when Caleb found those old vehicles, they're dealing with an automated world in a non-automated space. And so there still were those little touchstones of, Liam was allowed to drive his super fancy sports car around, but it was still in an automated space. So we dealt with all those different things of what those different nuanced details would be. So we really did find, I found that it's an interesting show to work on because there's those two juxtapositions, right? We're doing these massive world builds of buildings and greenery and robots. And then we're also dealing with, nope, sorry, we got to remove that red light way back in the background, because that's the sort of thing that when you're watching it, you might not really pick up on it, but inherently you start feeling, wait a minute, this just feels like LA. It doesn't feel any different. Yeah. But I think one of the interesting things when you watch the show, you kind of let it soak over you almost in some ways, that you go, I know it's LA, but something about it feels weird. What feels weird about it? And you don't really, the thing I find interesting thing about visual effects a lot of times is when we take away something, you don't really notice it. I always loved it when I would get scripts, and it would be like, and they look and it's not there. And it's like, guys, I don't know how we're supposed to tell it's not there. But the interesting thing is when it's an aesthetic thing, you actually do feel it over and over again throughout the season. When that motorcycle, autonomous motorcycle is running by the road, it feels, and that maybe it's the bridge right next to MacArthur Park, but you don't quite notice what's different about it until you look in the fact that, oh wait, there's no parking meters, there's no street signals, there's, the crosswalks have all been changed. We changed the pattern on a lot of the crosswalks to make it feel a little different. We added greenery, we added these interesting islands of green spaces. So that was, I think, those those juxtapositions of the details versus the broad things, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it makes it feel like a very tangible real world. It's like a place that we really could end up in. And you mentioned kind of letting it wash all over you. And one of the things that struck me most about the series is the whole thing, looks gorgeous, and everything is presented so seamlessly that at times it's very hard to tell, like, what is visual effects, what is production design, what is makeup work. And so I'm curious, like, what is the process like of actually figuring out what department needs to handle what? What is
Who's doing what?
Yeah.
I think it's always funny because as a visual effects supervisor, a lot of the times, there's this idea of like, we just always want to grab it and we want to do everything. And I think the interesting thing for us is I've had numerous department heads look at me during meetings. It's like, dude, all you do is tell everybody to build everything practically. I'm like, well, that's Jonah once, like, honestly, I always feel like from a visual effects standpoint, we could do everything, right? But that's not the goal. The goal is we do every possible thing practically that we can. And the things that we can't do, then we add visual effects into it. And what that does is, as a viewer, when there's so many things that are real, right? And they're done so much of the time real, if we do a visual effects version of it, you don't quite notice it. So I take, for advance, the rideshare vehicle, that cool, like, autonomous taxi that people drove in with the doors that open and whatnot. We built a real car. So there's a real stunt driver in the front of this tiny little thing. It's got a real engine, the door's really open, people are really in it, and we have people driving all over the place. But then when we take a version of that and we do it in CG and we put it into our shot, you don't quite know which one's real and which one isn't. You know what I mean? And then by the time you get to episode 5, when you've seen this autonomous vehicle so much throughout the season, when you get into a car chase, half the time that car pulling away is real. And then for all of the stunt work, we built a replica, full caged, but with the exact same frame base as our rideshare vehicle. But we had to put a bigger engine in it, obviously, to be able to do the stunt work. So the wheels were exactly the same, placement and ratio. The frame was exactly the same. And then we had a roll cage for our stunt driver, and we had witness cameras all over the car. So all the reflections are real. All the tactile things with the truck, with the tires and the skids and all those movements were all real. And then all the reflections were able to be captured and put onto it. And so we were able to take those, those two different pieces and go, okay, we kind of did the magic trick throughout the season, which is like, well, half the time it's real, half the time it isn't. And by the end of the day, audience members' brains kind of give up on the fact when they're trying to figure out which one's which I think is kind of one of the fun parts about
it. One of the most impressive, the car chases in genre were obviously very impressive, and the explosions. But one of the things that struck me that I think you might have done visual effects work on, because I don't think it exists anywhere in its entirety, is the Delos headquarters, because it has the massive pool out front. It has these great architectural elements. How do you cobble together that type of environment that, again, looks like a futuristic place that we could get to?
Well, that one is real. That is almost all real. Yeah, if you go to the City of Arts and Sciences in Valencia, Spain. Now, the interesting thing about that one was we needed to put it in San Francisco. So any of the times you look out, we basically put it on a fake island. We basically were like, what if you took this view? There is a place that you can do Google Maps and you kind of, well, it's kind of that angle. It is kind of that angle. But we basically said, well, what if they basically took that over? So anytime you're seeing San Francisco there, that's all visual effects. But the entire Delos campus, everything, the City of Arts and Sciences, that's real. And that's one of those things, I think, though, that it's so large scale, and that's the beauty of being able to go to a place like that. You're like, well, some of it has to be visual effects. It's like, no. Now, the interesting thing about it is that all of the stuff that's outside was all shot there. But when they're in the boardroom and when they're in Hale's office, we knew we couldn't take that much page count and all those secondary, all those guest stars, all those background actors, all those other, like basically we couldn't take everything. And mostly it was just obviously a scheduling thing where you only have a couple days there and you can't shoot that much stuff. Yeah. But that's where we were able to use LED technology and gaming engine technology. So Jonah and I have been talking about this for years. I remember when I first started in 2015, we had been working on Person of Interest for years, but he was just coming off of Interstellar. And he's like, okay, I love production technology. So that's why in season 1, we have this map and we have these, massive 4K projectors, and we had to figure out how a lot of people think that that's a visual effect, but it's all practical. Like it's basically a carved piece of styrofoam with projectors, and this thing rotates, and we had to figure out how to get the rotation of a physical object and keep the fixed cameras and have the visual effect. I mean, basically the projection rotate, and all the streams are moving. And the other interesting thing about that, tangent from season 1, but the time of day is always accurate. So we built a CG model of our entire Westworld park, and all the lighting in it is all practical, for lack of a better word. So all the shadows, when you look at it, you're like, wait, there's shadows being cast. And we always were very particular about whatever time of day it was in the park, we made sure that that was representative on the map. So if it's a nighttime scene, all of a sudden it's nighttime. If it's morning, we had one sort of lighting setup. But that's one of those things that he was obsessed with, this projection technology. And then we're trying to figure out, well, how can we push this further? So he comes up, he's like, so I want to take a projector, I want to put a sensor on the camera, I want to put a sensor in the room, and I want to have a computer that basically renders a background in a gaming engine and have it look photoreal. And this is 2015. I'm like, okay, let me go try and figure that one out. So we actually did. We built a supercomputer, got projectors, did tests, and the tests worked pretty well. Like, we were pretty amazed. There was some latency issues and there was some photorealism issues that we couldn't quite crack the code on. But this was 5 years ago. And then fast forward to, the way the technology's progressed now and what they're able to do on Mandalorian. And, I worked with John back on Revolution way back in the day on his, one of those, I think it might've been his first TV show. And then Jonah and him have a relationship, and we were able to go down and visit that, and kind of that shared knowledge of going, okay, well, that's what this technology looks like when you blow it up. How does this work for our show? And what we were able to do was be able to take all of those real environments from City of Arts and Sciences and then figure out which ones we were going to do as plate photography. So everything when you see the boardroom, that's all basic plate photography. That's not an Unreal, because honestly, the boardroom was so big, we couldn't build a screen. We could have, but it was going to cost too much to build the screen and do that with a gaming engine. But we were able to do it with Hale's office. So in episode 3, everything in Hale's office, that's all created in a gaming engine, and it's all captured in camera. So as the camera moves, the background translates, the lighting is all practical. We were able to, turn it off, and basically it went from day to night, and have these beautiful reflections and people walking and all those different things. But what we were able to do was be able to go to this actual location, put a camera up and say, all right, there's our angle, and then build the entire environment in Unreal and have all those different pieces and really know what it should look like for the most part. You know what I mean? We're like, okay, well, this is pretty much what it should look like. So how can we make that work in this gaming technology? And what that was able to do then is, because the interesting thing about it was all these other technologies, most of them haven't been done with film, and we still shoot on film. So to be able to take this digital technology and then marry it with the film technology, it really created this image that really does feel like Westworld. It feels like this kind of rich film vibe. And it really made the backgrounds look so beautiful. We did back side-by-side tests with digital versus film, and we were amazed at how not only did it hold up, it looked better on the film.
Yeah, I think all that, all those tools make it so seamless and make it just believable when something more sci-fi happens, like when Dolores gets her new body and she's putting on her skin and stuff. Does that... how do you have to approach a scene like that when you're doing so much other work that's just seamless and no one would ever kind of think actually it's visual effects?
Yeah, that's one of the hard things about Westworld is Lisa and Jonah, they push things so far, and it's super fun, but usually it's on the fly. So a lot of times you could do R&D maybe, and there's no time for R&D on our show. You're on the fly doing R&D while you're in the middle of doing prep meetings, while you're in the middle of doing deliveries, while you're doing all these other things. But at the same time, you still kind of have to tackle the thing each time. So you're sitting there going, all right, okay, who's going to do this? Is it going to be Howard in art department? Is it going to be Mark in special effects? Is it going to be Justin in makeup effects? Is it going to be visual effects? And thankfully, we've all worked together long enough we kind of have an understanding now of, all right, well, a lot of times it's Howard and his art department and production design team designing everything, giving us those files and running with them. Sometimes it was going to Bjarke Ingels, the architect. And that's really where we got most of the look for our show, was from the buildings that he had already done concept work for. So building these buildings, they weren't just, fabricated out of, nothing against visual effects artists, but they're not architects, so it wasn't just like, oh, we'll do something cool. It was all based on actual buildings. So some of the buildings are buildings that we just found interesting in other countries. Some of them are buildings that we found that we know are going to be built, that we found interesting. Some of them are straight out of Bjarke's library that he was generous enough to share with us. So it's like we kind of took all these pieces of real world things, and really we do have a very good shorthand now amongst all the different departments. But for like Dolores's arm, that was a situation that, you still look at the problem, right? The problem is she needs to tug on something. Well, I don't want her just to go like this. So we glued a skin flap onto her actual skin. So when she's tugging, do you know what I mean? She's actually tugging. So the movement that she has, even though this is a CG replaced hand, the rest of her body is not just going, oh, I'm pantomiming something. She's tugging on a real piece of skin that's connected to her body, but then you feel that, the different movements of that. And we use those things obviously to great effect. But, that's just Justin, tagging on a piece of skin. And then, we figured out, oh, wait, the skin arm is too long and the cut's too short. So now we have to make it bunch up, but it ended up looking beautiful. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's all those different pieces that really ends up making it be a lot of fun. And that tag team back and forth of who's doing what is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Is it ever there's just so much work that goes into each scene and different tactics and new technology. Is it ever if someone like me doesn't realize something is visual effects, do you just think, oh God, no one has any idea how much work goes into this, or is it just really satisfying to kind of have that be seamless?
That's what we kind of go for, working with Jonah and for so long, that's always the goal. The goal is that I think there's also something though about a show like Westworld. And it sounds weird, but coming off of Game of Thrones, it's almost like everybody assumes everybody has these huge, massive budgets. Do you know what I mean? And we just don't. Do you know what I mean? We got more money this year to do shots, but in the past we've worked with smaller budgets. But the interesting thing about it was it's almost like sometimes the viewers give visual effects more credit than they deserve. And it was like, oh, that was amazing how you did how you did that thing. It's like, no, we just went to City of Arts and Sciences, and that's not bad. I look at that as a good thing, where it's like, because it goes the other way as well. They kind of then would look at something else and think that they built it and it's all visual effects. Do you know what I mean? So it's that's kind of the beautiful magic trick of, as long as it look real, that's kind of the fun of it, right? And yeah, we had more shots this year than we had in season 1 or season 2. And I thought we were going to have less because we're in the real world and we can shoot more practical and we can be on streets more. And, but no, we had over 3,500 shots over only 8 episodes. Which is just a huge volume of shots. And then mix in, doing that in the midst of COVID, we still had almost 2,000 shots, 1,500, 2,000 shots left before, when we went into lockdown in the beginning of March, and we were already, in the middle of things were airing. So it became a real challenge to not move air dates and to power through. But our partners and vendors and artists and everybody, and honestly, Lisa and Jonah and the network, they all worked with all of us. Every department was under the gun to try and figure out how we were going to do this remotely. but everybody stepped up and we all were able to get it done.
Well, it's incredible seamless work. So we'll cross our fingers for you for more Emmy success. It was very exciting when you won the Emmy after Game of Thrones had just owned the category for so long. You actually managed to win in that off year.
Well, the off year, exactly. Yeah.
But I think now it's going to be exciting maybe to see you there again this year.
We can hope. Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me, Jay. Everyone who's watching at home, please subscribe to Gold Derby. We have plenty more interviews with contenders like this one. And thank you again for your time.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.